Okay, welcome. Today I thought I'd offer a reflection about the child of a boarding school survivor. So, what are some of the characteristics? What are the things to maybe look out for if your parents went to boarding school and maybe you didn't, but maybe there are some common traits and things just to look out for that maybe being brought up by ex-boarders actually has an impact psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. So I just want to talk about that. Okay, so we've been in the mists for a few days up here. And yeah, last week I got a message from someone, an email, someone asking me about that their parents were at boarding school, I think their father, and just feeling that they had some trauma there, being brought up by an ex-boarder. And then I have a client I'm working with this week who's just begun, and again, his father was at boarding school as well. And a lot of the clients I work with who are boarders, their parents have gone to boarding school as well. And it is often that this is the case, that the parents go to boarding school and then they send their children to boarding school as well. So I thought what I would more base this talk on today is more about if you were a child of an ex-boarder from that perspective, less kind of if you went to boarding school yourself, but obviously some people who had parents as ex-boarders, they they went to boarding school as well. So my own experiences, my father was ex-boarder, and my mother, she wasn't at boarding school, but all of her brothers, her father, friends, it was kind of very much, she came from a military background. Her father was in the army, so it was like boarding school was kind of very much the norm. So how I found my father was to be very cold and very angry. And interestingly, just before he died, when I was in my mid-20s, I confronted him because I knew that I only had a few days left to speak to him before he died. And I confronted him and I just said, I felt like you've hated me your whole life. And at that moment he burst into tears, and that was only the second time he showed emotion. First time was when he divorced from my mother, and the second time was then, and he burst into tears and he said, no, Piers, my whole life has been a lie. So if your parents went to boarding school, you didn't, the chances are they will not have given off a lot of love, caring. And I want to talk a little bit about this, but my own experience growing up was that I was never good enough for my father. We'd play games, but he was always trying to beat me. As a young boy, it was like, no, beat him. Trying to make me better. But actually, sometimes that's great. But sometimes a young boy or a young girl wants some love. They want some cuddles. And for me, there was no physical connection from my father. No hugs. No warmth. So that's often what we get from an ex-boarder, and this can traumatize us. I was talking to a client yesterday, and I was sharing this idea of in China, in Romania, often when aid workers have gone into these state-run orphanages, these babies are just lying there. They've not been touched, and sometimes I think certainly in Romania, these children had AIDS. So they were under the understanding, the locals, that if you touched them, you would get AIDS. And these babies are just almost dead in the cots. They're not moving. And the nurses were like, from the UK, like, no, they can be touched. You can be held. So they're touching these babies, and very soon they became alive again. They started laughing. It was like they returned to life. And I feel that is, if we've grown up with a boarding school parent, there will have been very little touch, very little cuddling. it might be a bit of a pat on the back, or well done son, or well done daughter, very good, but very little hugging or touching. It's like, it's sensuousness, not in a sexual way, but just that intimacy that humans, need. It's like stroking your hair as a child. That's kind of, I remember my mother doing that to me, and it's like, I loved that. But I never got that from my father. I never got that. And therefore, if both of our parents have been like that, then there's going to be a part of us that feels like those orphans in China or Romania, that lack of, almost sensuousness within ourselves. We didn't learn that it was okay, that there was something wrong with that. So, for me, I've kind of printed up, and I'll put this list into the bottom of the video. This is from my website, and it's just some of the symptoms that many of the ex-boarders kind of show. And basically, ex-boarders, generally we show 3 or 4 key traits. One is, lack of emotional intelligence. So we really struggle with emotions. So if your parents went to boarding school, then it might be that, they can't handle your anger. They can't handle your emotions, your tears. It'd be like, oh, come on, get over it. Rather than somebody who's more versed with emotions. It's like, as I got in touch with my emotions, and I've worked with children and scouts and as a school teacher, I've been able just to hold that space that, their tears are fine. I can feel them. Sometimes they'll evoke tears within me, just holding them, that, yeah, your tears are welcome. But if you have an ex-boarder as a parent, then often they don't have the emotional intelligence, and they will shame you for that. So it might be there's part of you that feels that as well. Another key trait with ex-boarders is, this, again, so emotional intelligence, but lack of intimacy, which I've already kind of spoken about. And then the third aspect is, I'd say, there's lots of things, but this wanting to do things on their own, needing their own space, or you go off and do your thing, and they're quite happy with that. But doing things together, if you do things together with a boarding school survivor, it's on their terms. And it's very controlling. It's like, right, we're going there, we're doing this. And I'd say another aspect is a lack of joy. A lack of joy and, spontaneity. Right, we're going here today. Yeah. Ex-boarder would be like, right, we're doing this. And a lack of joyfulness. It's just, I'm just doing. Joy is, for somebody else. That's weak. So some of the other symptoms here, which I'll just go through, that your parents might have shown, was they weren't able to switch off. It was like, you'd go on holiday with them, but they'd be stressed because they'd be wanting to do stuff. They'd go, right, we're going to go here. And you'd be like, I just want to lie on the beach, Dad or Mum. And they're like, no, we're going here, we're doing this. And so an ex-boarder struggles to switch off. And therefore, that's something you might have learned, that you struggle now to switch off. Another thing is perfectionism, controlling. So this thing about, they might have been very perfectionistic, that, if you failed at something, they were quite hard on you because they wanted you to be perfect rather than receiving you as you are. So maybe that's a trait you still have, that, oh, yeah, I want to be perfectionistic, I want to be good, so I'm blessed. It's like, as a certainly young boy, young girl, we talk about the depth psychology of the archetypes, is a young boy or a young girl wants to be blessed by their father, by the mother, by the king and the queen. And often ex-boarders really struggle to bless others because they struggle to bless themselves. They have a deep hatred almost of themselves, and therefore that can come across as a lack of blessing, just saying, God, that was brilliant what you did. I don't think I ever heard that from my father. He'd come and watch me play sport, but he never said well done. And when I spoke up about this, say last year, one of my family members said, oh, he still loved you. We knew that our parents loved us, but they didn't tell us. and they didn't show anything to show that they loved us. Oh, but we just knew. It's like a child doesn't know. So if you grew up with an ex-boarder, then, part of the work that I do with others is learning to change our story. So like I said with my own father, when he died, I felt like he hated me. And in the work I've done through doing my shamanic work, through my vision quests and matrix re-imprinting, my therapy, I've now changed the picture. I have a picture of my father that I reflect on every day, and he's running towards me, arms open. He says, "I loved you." And I can feel that in my heart. That's how we can shift. So that's something we can do. Another thing, if your parents are an ex-boarder, is that they might be really good at their career or their financial. They might be really successful, and they put that pressure onto you to succeed, but they're not there on the emotional plane. They might be successful, and they put that across, the importance of success. It's like, get the house, get the job, get the wife, and then happiness will come. But no, for me, my understanding is happiness comes first, and then the other things can flow. We come from that place. In the Upanishads, they said, from abundance he took abundance, and still abundance remained. And he also said, which I'm not sure where that came from, but the idea of the path is the destination. Yeah, so the path is the destination. That it's about happiness. What other things? Another thing is, they really struggle with being happy or joyful, ex-boarders. They don't know how to play. So you might want to be, maybe as a child you were like, oh yeah, I want to play, and your parents, if they were ex-boarders, would have gone, be quiet, stop messing around, be serious. Whereas somebody who's done their healing work or didn't go to boarding school might have been more open to, right, I'm going to play with my children. I'm going to be like that. Because of that disconnection with their own inner child, they struggled with that joy, and maybe there's still that there. So that might be a thing for you to work with is, what is it to play? What is it to be happy? What is it to be joyful? So I realise I could go on for hours with this because I've got a long list, and I don't like to have my videos go on too long. But I think, the last thing I just want to speak about is this idea of the lover archetype. And for me, when you look at the 4 archetypes of the king or queen, warrior, magician, lover, then the one from boarding school which we're missing the most is the lover. So that spontaneity, that joyfulness, that creativity. So what you might have noticed with your parents is, that lack of love, that lack of connection, that lack of sensuousness that you got. So there's a chance that you also have that, and therefore that's going to be an area to work with, which it was for me. Learning to be creative again, that it's okay to be creative without shaming myself. Just some ideas there about, the child of a boarding school survivor. Probably could go on, and if this resonates with you, if you'd like to know more, then I'm happy to do another video about this. I think, the person reached out to me last week. They said doesn't seem to be anything out there about this, so I just thought I would share. So then the key is, if you are a child of a boarding school survivor, just to notice, how am I with my children? And it's so important for us to do that inner work, so we don't then put those same traits we learned from our parents onto our children. And like I said, as I did my inner work myself, my relationship to children changed. I became more joyful, playful. It's like, oh, look, I can do this, I can do that. So I really invite that I'm not just doing the healing work for me, but so I don't put it onto my children as well. So, any questions, please do let me know, and I'll put a link to my that list of the other traits, so you can go, oh my God, that's so my mum, that's so my dad. Yeah. Okay, well, have an amazing week. Any questions, please do let me know. Many blessings.